And if I told you that even before the pyramids, before any writing, there was such an ancient, powerful religion that has shaped the entire way humans view the sacred to this day? We are not talking about a myth. We are talking about something real, hidden under the rubble of time. A religion born when man still faced beasts, slept in caves, and looked at the sky trying to understand. The legendary gods of the stone. Imagine a time when the fear of the night created rituals, where the thunders were voices of the gods, where fire was a miracle. Now imagine that these early signs of faith formed the oldest religion in Eurasia back in the Stone Age. What did these men see? What did they know? Why are so many symbols repeated in different cultures, in distant points of the planet? Get ready to hear stories that will give you goosebumps and that may reconfigure everything you believe about the beginnings of human spirituality. In this video, we'll open ancient tombs, decipher forgotten paintings, and talk to the stone gods. And the scariest thing, some of these rituals are still alive today. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel, because here we don't tell stories, we relive the origin of the sacred. And already comment there in the comments the word origin, if that already made your mind explode. Deep in the caves of Eurasia, our ancestors left indelible marks of their nascent spirituality. Cave paintings, sculptures, and artifacts reveal a deep connection to the spirit world, where each symbol and figure represented an attempt to understand the unknown. These artistic manifestations were not merely decorative. They were expressions of an emerging faith, where the sacred and the everyday intertwined in the shadows of the caves. The caves served as natural sanctuaries, providing a conducive environment for rituals and ceremonies. The darkness, silence, and unique acoustics of these spaces amplified the spiritual experience, allowing participants to connect with the divine in an intense and personal way. The depictions of animals, human figures, and abstract symbols on the cave walls suggest a rich and complex cosmology, where the natural and supernatural worlds coexisted in harmony. The presence of figurines, such as the famous Paleolithic Venus, indicates the veneration of female figures associated with fertility and creation. These sculptures, often found in ritual contexts, reflect the importance of the sacred feminine. In Stone Age spirituality, the emphasis on fertility and the continuity of life highlights the centrality of nature and reproduction in the worldview of these peoples. In addition to visual representations, archaeological evidence points to the use of sounds and music in ritual contexts. Rudimentary instruments, such as flutes made of bones, suggest that music played a crucial role in ceremonies, facilitating altered states of consciousness and promoting social cohesion. These musical practices, combined with visual representations, created a complete sensory experience, immersing participants in the spiritual world. The choice of caves as places of worship may also be related to the belief that these spaces were portals to other worlds. The depth and darkness of the caves symbolized Mother Earth's womb, a place of birth, death, and rebirth. Thus, the rituals performed in these places sought not only the connection with the divine, but also spiritual renewal and personal transformation. Analysis of religious practices in Stone Age caves reveals a spirituality deeply rooted in nature and human experience. Through art, music, and rituals, our ancestors sought to understand their place in the universe and establish a harmonious relationship with the forces that govern life. These primordial spiritual expressions laid the foundation for the religions that would develop later, profoundly influencing the trajectory of human spirituality. The mastery of fire represented a significant milestone in human evolution, not only as a survival tool, but also as a central element in Stone Age spirituality. Fire, with its ability to transform, protect, and illuminate, has become a powerful symbol of the divine, being revered and incorporated into various rituals and ceremonies. The discovery and control of fire allowed humans to gather around it, creating spaces for coexistence and sharing. These gatherings around the flames were not only moments of rest, but also opportunities to tell stories, transmit knowledge, and perform rituals. Fire thus became a catalyst for social cohesion and the transmission of spiritual traditions. In many Stone Age cultures, fire was seen as a gift from the gods, a sacred element that connected the earthly world to the divine. Rituals involving fire sought to purify, protect, and invoke blessings. The flames were used to burn offerings, symbolizing the delivery of gifts to the gods and the spiritual transformation of the participants. The maintenance of the sacred fire was a collective responsibility, often assigned to specific members of the community, such as shamans or elders. These firekeepers ensured that the flames never went out, thus maintaining the ongoing connection with the divine. The loss of the sacred fire was considered a negative omen, indicating the need for rituals of renewal and reconciliation with spiritual forces. In addition to its role in rituals, fire also had deep symbolic meanings. It represented the light of wisdom, the vital force, and the constant presence of the sacred in everyday life. The dancing flames were seen as visible manifestations of the gods, communicating messages and guidance to those who knew how to interpret their movements. Reverence for sacred fire in the Stone Age reflects an intuitive understanding of its importance, both practical and spiritual. By integrating fire into their religious practices, our ancestors recognized its ability to connect, transform, and illuminate, establishing a symbiotic relationship between the element and emerging spirituality. This relationship endures to the present day, evidenced in the continuous presence of fire in various religious traditions around the world. In times when nature was both home and threat, bones gained a role that went far beyond the biological. For the peoples of the Stone Age, bones were sacred relics, fragments of life and death that carried an ancestral power. They didn't see the remains as garbage. They saw it as portals, and it is in this universe where bones cease to be matter to become instruments of powerful spiritual rituals. The first hints of intentional burials bring more than graves. They bring a language, buried bodies with painted skulls, bones arranged in specific shapes, and adornments carefully placed next to the remains. It was not a farewell, it was a conversation with the beyond. The dead man did not cease to exist. He became a spiritual guide. Skulls were kept as relics inside the caves, sometimes painted with red ochre, representing blood, life, and rebirth. This pigment was not used by chance. Red was a symbol of the connection between the flesh and the spirit. To keep a painted skull at home was to keep the wisdom and protection of an ancestor always close by. Bones were also instruments, flutes made of femurs, command sticks carved into tibiae, necklaces made of phalanxes. Each piece had a story, each sound a meaning. It was believed that by playing these instruments, the soul of that being was summoned. This wasn't just tradition, it was spiritual practice. In the colder regions of Eurasia, bones of large animals such as mammoths and bison were also used in altars. They represented forces of nature, protective spirits of the tribes, symbols of abundance and survival. Offering their bones in rituals was a way of giving thanks and at the same time asking for their strength to continue accompanying the tribe. Some Stone Age cultures adopted complex bone exposure rituals, where bodies were left out in the open for the flesh to be consumed by nature, and only then were the bones collected for ceremonies. It was the cycle of visible, palpable, spiritualized life. Each bone collected was considered a purified part of the being. The way our ancestors treated bones demonstrates that, for them, death was not an end. It was transformation. Each bone was a living memory, a bridge between the worlds. And in this cult of the structure of life, one of the deepest forms of spirituality of humanity was born. Before patriarchy molded the gods as male figures, the spiritual universe of the Stone Age revolved around women, not only as a mother, but as a creator of the world. She was the fertile soil, the cyclical moon, the womb that connected the human to the divine. The Venus figurines, female figures with prominent breasts and hips, were not simple sculptures. They were symbols of spiritual power. The woman goddess was the center of life, death, and rebirth. She was the earth, the water, the blood. Everything was born from her, everything returned to her. Motherhood was sacred. But more than generating, the woman represented wisdom, healing, mystery. She was the one who dreamed of the future, the one who spoke to the dead, the one who guided the rites of passage. The tribes that worshipped the woman goddess were matrifocal, organized around feminine wisdom, not physical strength. The menstrual cycle was considered a direct connection with the forces of the moon. Women were seen as beings who carried time in their bodies. The caves, with their rounded, moist shape, were often associated with the womb of the goddess. To perform rituals, there was to return to the womb of creation. Stone Age priestesses were healers, midwives, prophetesses. His words had the weight of revelation. They were intermediaries between the visible and the invisible. In many cultures, the female role was so central that the goddess was the cosmos itself. Men worshipped, protected, and learned from her. The woman goddess was not an isolated deity. She was a plural presence, seen in all things. In the flowers that were born, in the game that came back abundantly, in the birth of a child, in the water that healed. She was in everything. The suppression of this cult over the millennia has transformed the spiritual imagination of the world. But its roots are still alive. The Stone Age woman goddess still breathes in mythologies, healing rituals, and the very idea that life is sacred. Imagine living in a world where every stone had a soul, every tree had a spirit, and every animal carried the essence of an ancient god. For the peoples of the Stone Age, this was not a philosophical idea, it was reality. The totems were not just symbols. They were living beings, divine forces that walked among humans and protected them. Totems emerged as physical representations of these forces. Carved in stone, wood, or bone, they were much more than art. They were spiritual presences, guardians of the tribes, messengers between the world of men and the world of the gods. They were revered, feared, and fed with offerings. Each clan or tribe had its main totem. It could be an animal such as the bear, the wolf, or the eagle. It was believed that this spiritual being had chosen that community to protect and guide it. Identification with this animal shaped the culture, rites of passage, names, songs, and even body designs of the members of the group. More than a symbol, the totem was a sacred bond, a blood link with nature. Killing a totem animal from one's own tribe was a very serious taboo. It was like attacking the spirit of the community. On the other hand, observing, imitating, and respecting this animal was a form of spiritual strengthening. Totem rituals included dances in which participants dressed up as the sacred animals, attempting to embody the spirit of the totem pole. During these rituals, it was believed that the human ceased to be just man and became something between the worlds. One channel, a spiritual warrior. Many of these totem poles were found drawn on the walls of caves. Bears with human faces, winged serpents, wolves with flaming eyes. These figures were not just products of the imagination, they represented visionary experiences, dreams, contacts with the other side. The totem was therefore a legendary god in natural form, and he was treated with the reverence of a deity. Every part of the animal, skin, tooth, claw, was considered magical and often used as a talisman or ritual object. Living totems have shaped the magical and spiritual thinking of entire generations. They taught that the sacred is everywhere and that the spirit can inhabit any form, just know how to see. Long before writing, the word engraved in stone, sound was the language of the gods. Our Stone Age ancestors knew this. For them, sound wasn't just vibration, it was spiritual force. And the sound of faith echoed in the flutes of bones, in the drums of skin, in the tribal cries that tore through the silence of the night. Archaeology has already found flutes that are more than 40,000 years old, made of animal femurs. These instruments were used in religious rituals, where music provoked altered states of consciousness. It was the sound guiding the soul. It was the melody connecting humans to the invisible. Human voices were also powerful spiritual tools, repetitive chants, primitive mantras, whispers in caves that seemed to come from another dimension. These practices provoked a collective trance, where each sound was an offering. The sound was invocation, protection, and prayer at the same time. The use of sound in rituals had a clear function: to transform the body, mind, and spirit. The rhythm, it was in this liminal space that man spoke to the legendary gods. The reverberation in the caves further amplified the feeling of sacredness. A single sound multiplied into echoes, as if dozens of spirits responded to the call. The environment, sound, and silence blended to create an almost otherworldly experience. Rudimentary drums, made with animal skins stretched over wooden structures, brought the beat of the world. Each beat was like the heart of the earth beating, and the dancers, moved by this pulse, let themselves be carried away to other states of perception. Sound was also used as protection. Specific whistles, guttural words, rhythmic beats were used to scare away evil spirits or invoke beneficent presences. It was sound magic, a form of communication that didn't need to be understood, it needed to be felt. Over time, the sound of faith evolved, but it never died. Its roots are in the first religions of humanity, and its strength still vibrates today. Every time a drum plays, a song echoes in a ritual. It is the spirit of the Stone Age that breathes again. In the skin of the ancients, stories were written that could not be erased. Before paper, before writing, before temples, skin was the temple, and tattoos were permanent prayers. For Stone Age peoples, tattooing the body was a spiritual act. Each stroke, each dot, each drawing was loaded with sacred meanings. These marks were more than aesthetics. They were protection, identity, and a channel of communication with the gods. They transformed the body into a spiritual map, an invisible armor, a living book that narrated lineages, conquests, sacrifices, and promises. The practice of tattooing dates back tens of thousands of years. The mummified body of Man, dated to more than 5,000 years ago, already bore ritualistic marks. But symbolic records of sacred skin go back to even earlier times. Tattoos were done with rudimentary tools, using bone needles or thorns and natural pigments such as charcoal, blood, and ash. Pain was part of the process, a sacrifice, a delivery. The more painful, the more powerful the tattoo was. It was a wound made to get the attention of the gods. Some marks were used as rites of passage, from childhood to adulthood, from life to the spiritual world, from ignorance to knowledge. Others were insignia of sacred hunters, healers, shamans. Whoever carried a spiritual tattoo was an initiate, someone who had been touched by the invisible. Simple symbols, such as spirals, eyes, open hands, or animals, were used with deep meanings. Each tribe had its codes, but they all understood. The tattoo connected the human to the eternal. It was as if the skin was a portal. Some tattoos were done after visions. Spiritual dreams guided shamans as to what should be marked on the skin of a tribesman. These dreams were considered messages from the legendary gods, and tattooing was the way to make this message physical. Today, the tattoo still carries echoes of this ancestry. Many modern drawings are resignifications of ancient symbols, and even without knowing it, today's ink carries the echoes of a very old spirituality. The ancients tattooed their faith on the flesh, and this custom, in a sense, has never been forgotten. Blood and stars, two elements that seemed opposite, but in Stone Age, spirituality were part of the same sacred equation. The blood represented sacrifice, life, surrender. The stars, the mystery, the destiny, the gaze of the gods. Together, they formed the cosmic cycle of existence. Rituals with blood were common, and not necessarily bloody. The blood could be from superficial cuts, from hunted animals, or even menstrual, all with one purpose: to feed the invisible. The idea was to give back to the cosmos what it had received. Blood was the spiritual currency. Many tribes viewed blood as liquid life energy. By pouring it during a ritual, it was believed that one created a direct channel to the spiritual world. It was the crudest and purest form of sacrifice, and the more sincere the surrender, the stronger the response of the gods. The stars, on the other hand, were silent guides. Ancient people saw in the constellations not only bright spots, but living entities that observed, guided, and judged. Some ceremonies were performed on specific nights, aligned with certain celestial bodies. The dance of the sky was read with attention. When stars disappeared, it was a sign of divine wrath. When new lights appeared, like meteors, they were interpreted as urgent messages. Eclipses then caused a real sacred panic. There were moments of fasting, prayers, and intense rituals. Interestingly, there are indications that some caves were built with astronomical alignments. The sunrise or the positioning of the stars guided the structure of places of worship. This shows that Stone Age spirituality was as earthly as it was cosmic. There are records of tribes mixing blood and stone dust to paint symbols on stones and caves, uniting the body and the cosmos in a single spiritual gesture. Every drop of blood shed was a request, each star observed, a response. The faith of the ancients was visceral and heavenly at the same time. They understood that the entire universe was a living organism, and that the blood that flowed through its veins was made of the same dust as the stars. Literally. They knew this without needing telescopes. They had no telescopes, no star maps, and no mathematical formulas. But they knew from the beginning that there was something giant, mysterious, and vigilant up there. To the peoples of the Stone Age, the sky was not just the roof of the world, it was the abode of the legendary gods, and these gods had guardians. In several Eurasian caves, drawings of figures with wings, giant eyes, or luminous bodies emerge, as clues left by our ancestors. These beings were not mere winged creatures, they were celestial observers, entities that guarded the balance between the visible and invisible worlds. The fear of heaven, and at the same time their admiration, gave rise to complex rituals of worship for these guardians. They were not always benevolent. Some protected them, others judged. Many appeared in moments of transition: births, deaths, eclipses, storms. One of the most present symbols in rock art is the eyes. Oval eyes, concentric circles, repetitive patterns, always looking. These eyes were the direct representation of these celestial beings. It was as if they were saying, "We're here, we always have been." The belief was that the guardians of heaven decided who would live, who would die, and who would have the chance to talk to the gods. For this reason, many shamans performed nocturnal rituals looking for these signs in the stars and in dreams. Induced by fire and sacred plants, some tribes carved stone figures with arms outstretched to the sky. These monuments were points of direct communication with the guardians. The wind, the clouds, the lightning, everything was interpreted as an answer. These celestial beings also appeared in the myths of punishment. When a crop failed or a warrior disappeared, the guardians were said to be angry, and sacrifices had to be offered to restore order. To the peoples of the Stone Age, the guardians of heaven were like cosmic judges, eternal beings, unreachable, but always attentive. They guarded the portals between the worlds, and only the chosen could pass through. Have you ever heard of spiritual trails? Invisible paths traveled by souls, shamans, and entities between worlds? In the Stone Age, there was a deep belief that there was a sacred route, an invisible line that connected the world of the living to the world of the dead. This line was the path of the spirits. These paths were not only symbolic. At various points in Eurasia, long alignments of stones, kilometers long, have been found. Some archaeologists believe that these constructions marked the route of the dead to their eternal abode. But for the shamans of the time, they were much more. Routes of connection with the spirit world. It was through these paths that souls walked after death, and also through where the spirits returned to visit the living. Therefore, walking along these routes was a ritual act, a purification process. During certain times of the year, tribes made silent pilgrimages along these trails. Nobody spoke, nobody ate. The only mission was to hear the winds, to see the signs, to feel the whispers of the other world. These paths crossed rivers, caves, hills, and trees marked with symbols. It was as if all of nature was encoded with instructions to traverse dimensions. Each point was a milestone, a spiritual checkpoint. At night, bonfires were lit at specific points. They were not just for warmth, they were beacons for souls not to be lost. Many believed that if the dead were trapped in the world of the living, they would cause imbalance. It was necessary to guide them. And when someone fell ill for no apparent reason, it was said that his spirit had gone off the path and been lost. The shaman's role was to lead him back, using chants, smoke, and amulets. The path of the spirits was more than a belief. It was a structure that organized the entire relationship with life and death. No one really died. He just left for another route, and those who stayed behind needed to learn to listen to the footsteps of the invisible. While they slept, the ancients traveled, and it wasn't imagination. For the peoples of the Stone Age, the dream was a sacred portal, a field where the gods, the dead, and the spirits could communicate with the living. Dreaming was not just a nocturnal activity. It was a ritual, a revelation. In many tribes, dreams were taken as seriously as any physical sign. If one dreamed of fire, rain, or a specific animal, it could change the fate of the community. The dream was prophecy. It was a message, and he was treated with reverence. Shamans were the main dream travelers. They prepared themselves with fasts, isolation, herbs, and rituals before bed. They believed that in this state, they could walk between worlds, talk to the gods, and bring answers to the people. Some tribes had specific tents for the prophetic dream. They were sacred, silent environments where only initiates could enter. Inside, time dissolved, and the dreams took shape. Dreams also guided important decisions: when to migrate, when to hunt, who to team up with, how to deal with unseen threats. If an elder had a clear dream, he could completely reverse a collective decision. Such was the faith in this direct contact with the spiritual world. There was also the fear of bad dreams. Nightmares were not seen as simple reflections of the unconscious, but as spiritual warnings or even attacks by evil forces. It was common to perform purification rituals after disturbing nights. Some records indicate that certain symbols drawn in caves were based on collective dreams. Several members of the tribe dreamed of the same animal, the same sign, the same voice. This was seen as a divine calling, and it was to be eternalized in stone. To this day, many indigenous peoples preserve the idea that the dream is not an invention. It is an experience. The ancients knew that while eyes close, other eyes open, and those eyes see what is hidden in the light of day. Before words came symbols, and for the peoples of the Stone Age, they spoke loudly. Every spiral, every primitive cross, every trace in stone was not just art, it was sacred language, a way to communicate with time, with the gods, and with the future. The walls of caves were like spiritual books. Each drawing was a sentence, each combination a ciphered message, and only the initiated knew how to read. Repeated symbols in different regions show that this language had universal codes. Spirals, hands, eyes, serpents, circles. Each one had a spiritual weight. The spiral, for example, represented infinity, birth and rebirth. The eye, the divine vigilance. The serpent, the cycle of life and death. These symbols were passed down from generation to generation. They were taught through stories, visions, and spiritual experiences. No one learned just by looking. They learned by feeling, by living. Each symbol was an initiation. There were personal, tribal, and universal symbols. Some were used in healing rituals, others in protection from evil, and some only in secret ceremonies in which the truth of the world was revealed to a few. Some sacred stones were covered with marks, not for beauty, but for power. They carried the spiritual seals that prevented evil spirits from approaching. Other symbols, on the contrary, attracted the gods. They were invitations, open doors to the sacred. The tattoo, the necklace, the body paint, everything was code. A shaman could tell a person's spiritual history just by looking at the symbols they carried. Today, many of these symbols have been absorbed into modern religions. Modified, yes, but with clear roots in the Stone Age. They keep talking, even if most have forgotten how to listen. Long before there were temples, scriptures, or even names for the gods, a man looked up at the sky and spoke with silence. That was the first prayer. He had no pretty words. There were no rhymes. It was just a raw plea, a plea whispered in the wind, a tear that fell as the bonfire burned. In the Stone Age, praying was more instinct than doctrine. It was raising your hands when the thunder roared. It was singing to call the game. It was crying and blowing to the sky when someone died. It was trying to make the invisible listen. There was no formula, but there was delivery. The first humans prayed with their bodies. They danced, shouted, bowed, tattooed their faith on their skin. It was a physical, pulsating, living spirituality. Prayer was in the gestures. Sometimes it was just silence, a respectful, deep silence, in the face of death, in the face of life, in the face of the unknown. This silence was understood as listening, and listening was also praying. The first prayer could be a cry of fear, a sigh of love, a whisper of pain. It was an act of connection, and although the gods did not yet have a name, a bridge was already being made with them. The cave paintings, the stones erected, the tattooed bodies, all these were prayer carved into the world. Each symbol was an attempt to converse with mystery. It was the certainty that there was something beyond, and that somehow this something could answer. When a father laid his hands on his sick son and sang an old tune, he was praying. When a mother offered the first piece of the game to the fire, she was praying. When an elder walked alone in the woods in search of a sign, he was praying. Prayer was done with everything: eyes, feet, breath, fear, hope. And the legendary gods, though invisible, were real in the hearts of the prayer. Today, thousands of years later, the essence of that first prayer lives on. The words have changed, the rituals have changed, but the desire is the same: to be heard by the mystery, to be welcomed by the eternal. The first prayer of mankind had no witnesses. but it echoes to this day in every heart that opens to the unknown. And maybe, just maybe, that's why we still exist, because someone millennia ago dared to speak to the invisible.